"You will sleep with me tonight?" Three giant Apache girls said, lone famer. Marcus had always lived a quiet life. His farm was small but enough for him to survive comfortably. He woke up early every day, just as the first sunlight touched the fields. The birds would chirp, and the soft wind would rustle the tall grass. Marcus liked the calm of these mornings. It made him feel safe, like nothing could ever disturb his little world. He worked hard on his land, feeding the animals, fixing the fences, and planting crops that he hoped would grow well in the harsh plains. His neighbors were far away, and the town was a long ride from his home. Most days, he didn't see anyone besides his animals, and that was exactly how he liked it. People in the town often whispered about Marcus. They said he was lonely and maybe a little strange, living all by himself. But Marcus didn't mind what others thought. He liked having space to think, space to breathe, and space to live life at his own pace. Every night he would sit outside by the fire, watching the stars fill the sky. The silence was comforting, and the world seemed to slow down in a way that made sense to him. But life on the plains wasn't always quiet. Rumors had a way of spreading fast, and recently, a new story had reached Marcus's ears. People in town were talking about three sisters who lived somewhere near the forest on the edge of the plains. These sisters were known to be tall and strong, and they carried themselves with confidence that made people stop and stare. They were different from everyone else, independent, in a way that others found both fascinating and intimidating. The rumors were filled with exaggerations, of course, but one thing was clear. These sisters did not follow the usual rules of the town. They lived by their own laws, moved freely, and seemed to command respect wherever they went. Marcus hadn't seen them himself, and he tried not to think too much about it. After all, he had work to do, and his days were full of routine. But curiosity is hard to ignore. Every now and then, he would glance toward the edge of the forest when he passed by, wondering if he might catch a glimpse of them. Sometimes he imagined what it would be like to meet someone so bold and so different. He had spent so many years alone that the idea of interacting with people who weren't like anyone else filled him with a mix of excitement and nervousness. On a warm afternoon, Marcus was tending to his animals. The sun was high in the sky, making the shadows short and the air heavy. He had just finished feeding the cows and was moving toward the chickens when he noticed something unusual. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't any animal he recognized. It was deliberate, slow, and confident. Marcus paused, holding his breath, trying to see better. Then he saw them. The three sisters were stepping out of the forest, their tall figures casting long shadows across the field. Marcus felt his heart beat a little faster. They were even taller than the stories had said, with strong, confident strides that made it clear they belonged to the land they walked on. Their faces were serious but not unkind, and their eyes seemed to look right through him, as if they already knew who he was. Marcus froze, unsure of what to do. He had never had strangers approach him on his own land, let alone people who looked so powerful and certain of themselves. For a moment, he considered turning away and pretending he hadn't seen them, but something inside him told him he couldn't. He had to face this moment, whatever it might bring. The sisters stopped a few steps away from him. There was a silence that stretched long enough to feel heavy. Marcus wanted to speak, but words stuck in his throat. The sisters looked at him with a mix of curiosity and amusement, as if they had expected him all along. Marcus felt small in comparison, though he stood as tall as he could. He realized in that instant that his quiet, orderly life had suddenly changed. Something new had arrived, and it demanded his attention. One of the sisters stepped forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. She had a calm but commanding presence, and Marcus felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. The other two sisters flanked her, standing slightly behind but close enough to make their presence felt. Marcus could sense that they moved together, a team, a unit that had been through life supporting each other. Their confidence was not something he had ever experienced before, and it left him both awed and cautious. He tried to think of something to say, some way to greet them politely without offending or frightening them. "Hello," he finally managed, his voice quieter than he wanted. I'm Marcus. Welcome to my farm." The sisters did not laugh or react in a way that made him feel embarrassed. Instead, they nodded, acknowledging him. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. It was as if they were saying, "We see you and we respect you," without needing to speak a single word beyond that. Marcus felt a strange comfort in it, though he still did not understand why they were here or what they wanted. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of the forest and the dry grass across the field. Marcus noticed the strength of their presence. They were not threatening in a traditional sense, but they were powerful in a way that made him keenly aware of his own solitude. He realized that life on the plains had been predictable, and this moment was anything but. The sisters remained quiet, letting Marcus gather his thoughts. He felt the tension rise, but it was not entirely unpleasant. Something about their arrival demanded attention, demanded awareness, and perhaps even growth. Marcus knew that this encounter would be remembered, no matter how brief. It was the kind of moment that changes ordinary days into something extraordinary. The kind of moment where life reminds you that the world is bigger than your farm, your routine, and your comfort zone. Marcus tried to observe them carefully. He noticed the way they carried themselves, the rhythm of their steps, and the way they looked around, taking in the land as if it belonged to them as much as it did to him. He felt both intrusion and curiosity. Their presence was a puzzle, and he wanted to understand it without making a mistake. For a long while, the three sisters and Marcus simply looked at each other across the field. No words were spoken, but the air was full of unspoken communication. Marcus understood that this was a rare kind of encounter, one that did not happen often, if ever. It was a meeting of worlds, one quiet, solitary, and controlled, the other bold, free, and unpredictable. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long golden rays across the farm, Marcus felt that the day had shifted forever. His life, once so quiet and steady, had opened a door he had not expected. He did not yet know what would come next, but he felt the first stirrings of something new: curiosity, awareness, and perhaps a challenge. And in that moment, Marcus realized that his life on the plains, as peaceful as it had been, was about to change. He would never see the world the same way again. The three sisters, tall and confident, had arrived, and with them the unknown had come to his doorstep. Marcus watched the three sisters carefully, trying to understand why they had come to his farm. His heart still beat faster than usual, and he felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. He had never had visitors like this, and their confident, calm presence was unlike anything he had seen before. For a moment, he thought maybe he should go back inside the house, close the door, and wait until they left. But something in him told him he could not do that. He needed to face this moment. The tallest of the sisters stepped forward slightly, her eyes scanning the farm, then settling on Marcus again. She seemed to carry an invisible weight of authority, the kind of quiet power that made people notice her without her saying a word. Marcus realized that whatever reason had brought them here, it was serious. These were not ordinary travelers passing by. They had a purpose. "Your farm is quiet," one of the sisters said, her voice calm but firm. She looked around, nodding slightly as if appreciating the work Marcus had done on the land. Marcus felt a little pride swell in his chest. He had worked hard to make his farm a safe, comfortable place, and here were these strangers noticing it. "Thank you," Marcus replied cautiously. I try to take care of it the best I can. He paused, unsure what to say next. Can I help you with anything? The sisters exchanged a glance, brief but meaningful, and Marcus noticed that the one speaking smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. Then she said, We need a place to stay tonight. We heard about you and we thought perhaps you could let us rest here. Marcus's mind raced. He had not expected this. He lived alone and he had never hosted strangers on his farm, especially not people as bold and confident as these sisters. He hesitated, unsure if he should agree. I don't usually have visitors, he said slowly. But I suppose I can make room. The sisters nodded, their expressions unreadable. They moved gracefully toward the farmhouse, and Marcus followed, feeling a strange tension in the air. He noticed the way they moved together, coordinated yet independent, and it reminded him of animals moving in a group, each aware of the others, each protecting the whole. He felt both nervous and intrigued. Inside the farmhouse, Marcus showed them where they could sit. The sisters did not complain or demand. They simply observed the small, cozy space as if measuring it, understanding it, yet not judging. Marcus brought them some water and offered what little food he had. The sisters accepted politely, their manners respectful but confident. Marcus found himself studying them, wondering what kind of life they led, what had made them so strong, and why they had come here of all places. One of the sisters finally spoke. We are not looking to cause trouble, she said quietly, her eyes meeting Marcus's. We only need a place to rest for the night. Tomorrow, we will move on. Marcus felt a small wave of relief. Their visit, as surprising as it was, did not seem threatening, but at the same time he felt a new kind of pressure, the pressure of having these strangers in his home, of being responsible for them, and of wondering what they truly wanted. Marcus tried to make conversation. How did you hear about my farm? He asked. He felt awkward, but he wanted to understand why these three women had traveled so far to find him. One of your neighbors mentioned you, the sister replied. They said you are a kind man and that you live alone. We thought you might help us. Her voice was gentle but carried a strength that made it clear she expected honesty. Marcus nodded, feeling a mix of pride and uncertainty. As the evening passed, Marcus noticed small details about the sisters that fascinated him. The way they spoke to each other without words, the way they noticed small things in the room, the way they seemed completely comfortable in the world yet still cautious of him. It was unlike anyone he had ever met. They were strong, independent, and intelligent, and Marcus felt both admiration and a strange unease. He realized that his ordinary, quiet life was suddenly filled with questions he had never asked himself before. As the sun set, casting a warm orange glow across the fields, the sisters prepared for the night. Marcus offered them the small spare room, and they accepted, moving gracefully toward it. But before they left the main room, the tallest sister paused and looked back at him. Her eyes were calm but serious. We trust you will not interfere with our rest, she said softly, and we will respect your home as you respect us. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something about her words, something about the way she spoke, that made him understand this was not a simple visit. There were rules here, unspoken but clear, and he needed to follow them. The sisters were not asking permission in the usual way. They were stating an expectation, and Marcus realized he had little choice but to respect it. That night, Marcus tried to sleep, but it was impossible. The quiet of his home felt different now, filled with the memory of the sisters' presence. He thought about their arrival, their confidence, and the way they had stepped into his world without hesitation. His mind was restless, filled with questions. Why had they come to him specifically? What did they want? And most importantly, How would he navigate this unexpected intrusion into his quiet life? Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the sounds of the plains. Marcus could hear the sisters settling into the spare room, their voices quiet but purposeful. He realized that they were used to surviving in the world on their own terms. They had a presence that demanded attention, that made him reconsider the way he had lived alone for so long. He felt a mixture of respect, awe, and nervousness. The night seemed long, and Marcus lay awake, thinking about the day's events. He replayed their arrival over and over in his mind, noting every detail, their movements, their words, their silence, and the way they had looked at him. He realized that this night was a turning point. Something about it would change the way he saw the world, the way he saw himself, and perhaps even the way he lived his life. Morning arrived slowly, with pale light filtering through the windows. Marcus felt exhausted, yet a strange sense of anticipation filled him. The sisters were still asleep, and for a moment he studied their quiet forms. He realized that they were not just visitors. They were forces of nature in human form, bringing with them change, challenge, and questions he had never asked. As the day began, Marcus knew that his life would never return to its old, predictable routine. The sisters' visit had disrupted his calm, quiet existence, and he could not ignore the effects. Their presence had awakened something in him, a curiosity, a tension, and an understanding that the world was bigger and more complex than he had realized. He made himself busy with chores, trying to steady his mind, but every sound, every movement reminded him that they were still here. He had to be careful, respectful, and attentive, and that was a challenge in itself. He realized that he could no longer simply live in the rhythm he had always known. He had to adapt, to understand, and to face the uncertainty that now filled his farm. By the afternoon, the sisters were awake, and Marcus knew that the true test of this encounter had begun. Their intentions, while polite, were firm. He had to learn how to coexist with them for the night, balancing respect, curiosity, and caution. Every word, every gesture, every glance mattered now. Marcus felt both nervous and alive, realizing that this unusual visit was more than just a disruption. It was a lesson in humility, awareness, and human connection. For the first time in many years, Marcus felt his calm life shifting into something unpredictable. He did not yet know how the night would end or what he might learn from these strangers. But one thing was certain: nothing on his farm would ever feel the same again. Marcus had spent most of the morning keeping busy, feeding the animals, repairing the fence, and tending to the small garden behind his farmhouse. But no matter what he did, he could not shake the thought of the three sisters. Their presence filled the house like an invisible weight, quiet but undeniable. Even when he chopped wood or collected water from the well, he felt their eyes on him, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made him aware of himself more than he ever had been. By late morning, the sisters had emerged from the spare room, stretching and moving with the calm confidence Marcus had noticed before. They walked through the farmhouse as if it were familiar to them, inspecting corners, noticing the small details that he had overlooked for years. Marcus felt a mix of pride and anxiety. Pride because they seemed impressed by the care he had taken in his home. Anxiety because it reminded him how unprepared he was for their sudden arrival. The tallest sister spoke first, her voice calm but commanding. "Your life is orderly," she said. "You have routines, rules, a way of living that keeps you safe." Marcus nodded, unsure whether this was a compliment or a simple observation. "Yes," he admitted. "I like things steady. It makes life easier," but did not reach her eyes. "Steady is safe," she said, "but safe is not the same as knowing who you are. Sometimes life brings unexpected moments that test patience, courage, and understanding. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. She was right. The day they arrived was proof that life could suddenly shift, and he had no idea how to respond. The other two sisters moved closer, and Marcus noticed how naturally they coordinated with each other, finishing each other's sentences, glancing toward him at the right moments. It was not threatening, but it was commanding. He realized that their presence was a test of sorts, not just for him, but for the dynamics of interaction itself. Every glance, every movement, every word mattered. Marcus tried to make conversation, asking about their journey, why they had come to this part of the plains, and what had brought them so far from their home. The sisters answered honestly but carefully, revealing only what they chose to. Marcus noticed that they were observant, studying him as much as he studied them. He began to feel exposed, as though his life, his routines, and even his thoughts were open to scrutiny. By afternoon, the sun had climbed high, making the farmhouse warm and casting strong shadows across the fields. Marcus felt a tension growing inside him, an awareness that nothing in the ordinary world could have prepared him for. The sisters were polite, but polite in a way that demanded understanding. They did not push him or speak harshly, but their presence was insistent. Marcus felt both admiration and fear. Admiration for their strength and clarity. Fear because he was untested, uncertain, and suddenly vulnerable. At one point, the tallest sister approached him while he was fixing a fence. "Do you often live alone?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying curiosity rather than judgment. Marcus paused, holding a hammer mid-air. "Yes," he said slowly. "Most of the time, it is just me and the animals." "I like the quiet," she nodded, her expression unreadable. "Quiet can be comforting, but it can also hide things. Hiding from challenges does not mean they do not exist. Facing them, that is how people grow." Marcus felt a mix of discomfort and intrigue. Her words were true, yet they made him uneasy. He had lived quietly for so long, and suddenly he felt that his life, his choices, and even his courage were being tested. The day continued, and Marcus found himself increasingly aware of the sisters' movements. They were confident, but they also observed carefully. They noticed the small details of his farm, the way he moved, the patterns of his day. It was as if they were learning him, studying him, not to judge, but to understand. Marcus realized that he had never been observed like this before. He had never felt this level of attention, and it made him anxious, thoughtful, and strangely alive. As the afternoon wore on, the sisters began to ask him questions about his life, about his childhood, his family, and the reasons he had chosen to live alone. Marcus answered cautiously, revealing only what felt necessary. But even in his careful answers, he realized that he was opening himself up in ways he had not done in years. The sisters were not pressing him, not demanding answers, but their curiosity encouraged honesty. Marcus felt that every response carried weight. Then, late in the afternoon, something unexpected happened. The sisters invited Marcus to step outside with them. They wanted him to show them the far side of the property, the part where the land dropped into a small ravine. Marcus hesitated, unsure why they wanted to see this part of the farm. But he followed, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. As they walked, the tallest sister spoke again. "It is easy to live in a routine, to build walls around yourself. But life has a way of pushing against walls. Sometimes walls must be tested, adjusted, or even removed. It is not weakness, it is learning." Marcus listened carefully, realizing that she was not only talking about physical walls or routines, but also about the boundaries he had built in his life. When they reached the ravine, the sisters paused. Marcus noticed that the wind was stronger here, carrying the scent of grass, soil, and wildflowers. The tallest sister turned to him. "This land is yours, and yet you live carefully within it. There is strength here, but there is also potential you have not explored. Life is bigger than the safety you have built." Marcus felt the weight of her words. They were gentle, yet challenging, like a teacher encouraging a student to see beyond their limits. The other sisters moved closer to him, and for the first time, Marcus realized how unusual this visit had become. Their presence was no longer simply surprising. It was shaping him. He felt tension rise in his chest, not from fear, but from the awareness that he was being called to face something beyond his comfort zone. The quiet, predictable life he had known was giving way to uncertainty, and he did not yet know if he was ready. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, the sisters continued to speak in calm, thoughtful tones. They asked about his goals, his fears, and what he hoped to achieve in life. Marcus answered cautiously, feeling that every word mattered. The sisters listened carefully, nodding occasionally, offering small comments that seemed simple but carried a deep meaning. By the time they returned to the house, Marcus felt as though he had been on a journey, not just across his property, but within himself. That evening, as the sun began to set, Marcus felt a new awareness of the sisters' presence. They were not only guests, they were catalysts, forces that had entered his life to challenge his assumptions, test his patience, and awaken a part of him that had lain dormant for years. He realized that he could not go back to the way things had been. Something fundamental had shifted, and he would need to confront it. Dinner was quiet, but charged with unspoken tension. Marcus served the sisters what little food he had prepared, and they accepted it with calm gratitude. Conversation continued, but now it carried more weight. The sisters asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and occasionally offered gentle observations that made Marcus reflect on his life in new ways. He realized that their visit was about more than rest. It was about understanding, growth, and connection. By nightfall, Marcus felt exhausted, but awake in a way he had never been before. The day had been long, filled with lessons, challenges, and awareness. The sisters had shown him that life could shift suddenly, that routines could be disrupted, and that true strength came not from walls or isolation, but from openness, courage, and understanding. Marcus knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and that he would need to meet them with patience, attention, and respect. As he prepared for bed, Marcus realized that the quiet of his life had been replaced by a new rhythm. The sisters' presence had escalated the tension in a way that was both uncomfortable and enlightening. He understood that this was not a simple visit, but a turning point. His life on the plains, once predictable and safe, was now full of unknown possibilities. And for the first time in many years, Marcus felt truly alive, aware of himself, aware of others, and aware that life was bigger, stronger, and more unpredictable than he had ever imagined. The evening settled over Marcus's farm like a heavy blanket. The sky was painted with deep shades of orange and purple, and the first stars began to shimmer faintly in the distance. Marcus had been busy with chores most of the afternoon, but now he found himself standing still, staring at the horizon. Something about the sisters' presence had grown heavier as the day passed. Their quiet confidence, their unspoken expectations, and the constant awareness of being observed had begun to press on him in ways he had never experienced. Inside the farmhouse, the sisters moved calmly, each one going about small tasks, tidying up and organizing what little space Marcus offered them. They did not speak much, but when they did, their words carried meaning. Each phrase seemed carefully chosen, measured, and deliberate. Marcus felt a mixture of admiration, respect, and a subtle tension that he could not shake. He realized that the day had brought lessons he hadn't anticipated. Lessons about patience, awareness, courage, and the unknown. Marcus tried to focus on small things, feeding the animals, checking the fences, gathering firewood, but his thoughts kept returning to the sisters. Their presence had shifted his perspective on his own life. The quiet routines that had defined his days now seemed fragile, almost meaningless in the face of the intensity the sisters carried with them. Every movement he made, every glance he gave, felt like it was being noticed, evaluated, and understood. It was a strange kind of pressure, not hostile, but undeniable. As the sky darkened and shadows grew long across the farmhouse, the tallest sister approached him. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial in their calmness. She stopped just a few feet away, looking at him with steady, unwavering eyes. Marcus felt his heart pound in his chest. Her gaze was not threatening, but it carried a weight that he could not ignore. "Marcus," she said quietly, "tonight is not just any night. You will have to face something within yourself. We have come here not only to rest, but to see how you respond when the unexpected enters your life. Will you remain frozen in fear, or will you act with understanding and courage?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had never been challenged like this before, not by anyone, and certainly not by strangers. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out immediately. The weight of her observation, the seriousness of her tone, and the clarity in her eyes made it impossible for him to respond carelessly. I will try," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I don't know what I should do, but I will try." The sister nodded slightly, satisfied with his answer. She stepped back, and the other two sisters moved closer, forming a quiet semicircle around him. Marcus felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mixture of anticipation and unease. He realized that this moment was more than a test of courage. It was a test of awareness, judgment, and emotional strength. They asked him to step outside with them once again. The air had cooled, and the night was filled with the sounds of crickets and the soft rustling of leaves. Marcus followed cautiously, noticing how the sisters seemed completely at ease in the darkness, while he moved carefully, almost as if navigating a new and unfamiliar world. When they reached the open field near the edge of the forest, the tallest sister spoke again. "Look at the stars, Marcus," she said softly. "They remind us that life is vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges. Just as the stars shine even in the darkness, people must find their own light in difficult moments." Marcus looked up at the sky, the brilliant points of light stretching endlessly above him. He felt a strange calm mixed with nervousness. The sisters' words had a rhythm that resonated deep inside him, making him aware of his fears, his limitations, and the parts of himself he had kept hidden for too long. "Tonight," the sister continued, "you will have to face your own uncertainties. We will not harm you, but you must navigate this situation with honesty, respect, and courage. Do you understand?" Marcus swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I understand," he replied. His voice sounded firmer than he expected, but his mind was racing. He did not fully understand what was being asked of him, yet he sensed the importance of the moment. The sisters guided him back toward the farmhouse, where they had prepared a small space near the fireplace. Marcus realized that the night would not be ordinary. The sisters' presence was demanding attention, not through force, but through quiet intensity. Every movement mattered, every decision carried weight, and Marcus felt the pressure mounting. As they settled into the space, the tallest sister spoke again, this time more directly. "Marcus, you have lived a life of order and routine. That has served you well, but it has also limited you. Tonight is an opportunity to see beyond your comfort zone, to embrace uncertainty without fear. Are you willing to try?" Marcus felt a tremor of fear, but also a spark of determination. He had spent so many years avoiding discomfort, avoiding unpredictability, avoiding anything that might challenge his quiet life. But now, standing before these women who moved with confidence and purpose, he realized that true growth required risk. "I am willing," he said, his voice stronger now. "I will face what comes, and I will try to learn." The sisters smiled faintly, approving his words. They did not offer further explanation, leaving the next moments entirely to him. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility, not just to himself, but to these visitors who had trusted him to respond with care and awareness. Hours passed, and Marcus remained attentive, aware of every movement, every sound, every detail in the room. The sisters spoke little, but their silence was purposeful. It was as if they were teaching him to listen, observe, and understand without words. Marcus realized that this was the essence of the test. He had to remain aware, thoughtful, and respectful, even in uncertainty. At one point he noticed one of the sisters glance toward the window, then nod slightly to the tallest sister. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. He could sense that they were communicating silently, that there was a depth to their connection that he did not fully understand. Yet he also felt included in their awareness, as if his own presence mattered in this intricate web of observation and understanding. Night deepened, and the farmhouse grew quieter. Marcus felt fatigue, but it was mixed with alertness. He understood that this night was a turning point, not just in his encounter with the sisters, but in his own self-awareness. He had to remain patient, respectful, and conscious, even as the hours stretched long and the unknown seemed to expand around him. At the peak of the night, the tallest sister approached him once more. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, a gesture that conveyed both reassurance and seriousness. "Marcus," she said softly, "you have faced uncertainty with honesty. You have observed, listened, and respected. This is the essence of courage, not the absence of fear, but the presence of understanding and awareness." Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest. The tension, the pressure, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment of clarity. He realized that the night had tested him, not through confrontation or conflict, but through awareness, attention, and patience. He had faced the unexpected, and he had not faltered. The sisters settled back into the space near the fireplace, and Marcus sat quietly, feeling the quiet power of the night. The world outside was still and vast, yet he felt connected to it in a new way. He understood that growth often comes through discomfort, through challenges that push us beyond what we know and what we are comfortable with. Hours later, Marcus finally allowed himself to rest. The sisters' presence remained calm and steady, and he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had faced the night with awareness, respect, and courage, and in doing so, he had discovered a strength within himself he had never known. As he drifted into sleep, Marcus understood that the breaking point of the night was not about fear or danger. It was about growth, understanding, and the courage to face uncertainty. The sisters had guided him through a challenge, and he had emerged aware, attentive, and alive in a way he had never experienced before. When dawn approached, the first light of morning cast soft hues across the farmhouse. Marcus knew that the night had changed him, preparing him for the challenges and lessons of the day to come. The breaking point had passed, and he had faced it with honesty, respect, and courage. He felt stronger, more aware, and ready to embrace whatever came next. Morning came slowly over Marcus's farm, spilling soft, golden light across the fields and farmhouse. The chill of the night had faded, replaced by the warmth of early sunlight. Marcus stirred awake, feeling a quiet peace that was different from the calm he had known before. The previous night had been long, filled with tension, awareness, and lessons, but it had also brought clarity. He realized that something fundamental had shifted in him, and he could not return to his old life as though nothing had happened. The three sisters were awake too, moving with the same quiet confidence Marcus had noticed since their arrival. They were preparing for the day, gathering their belongings and organizing the small space they had occupied near the fireplace. Marcus watched them silently, fascinated by their grace and attention to detail. They had not been demanding or intrusive. Instead, they had shown him a way of living that combined strength, awareness, and subtlety. Marcus approached them cautiously. He wanted to speak, to express his gratitude for their presence, and to acknowledge the lessons he had learned. "Thank you," he said softly. "For everything last night, I have learned more than I expected." The tallest sister smiled faintly, the gesture gentle yet commanding. "You faced uncertainty with courage," she said. "You listened, observed, and responded with respect. That is more than many people can do. We came here to test not only your patience, but your understanding of yourself. You have proven that you are capable of growth." Marcus felt a surge of pride, mixed with humility. The sisters had not judged him harshly, but they had challenged him in ways he had never imagined. He realized that the night had been a turning point, a moment when he confronted the unexpected, acknowledged his fears, and discovered a strength within himself he had not known existed. The other sisters approached him, nodding quietly in acknowledgement. Marcus noticed the calm confidence in their eyes, the subtle encouragement that seemed to flow without words. He understood that their visit had been about more than rest or curiosity. It had been about connection, awareness, and the shared human experience of facing challenges. They spent the morning talking quietly, sharing stories of their own lives, their journeys, and the challenges they had faced. Marcus listened intently, realizing that each story carried lessons about resilience, courage, and the importance of understanding others. He felt a growing respect for the sisters, not just for their strength, but for the way they carried themselves with grace, awareness, and clarity. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the sisters prepared to leave. Marcus walked with them toward the edge of the farm, feeling a mixture of sadness and gratitude. He had grown attached to their presence, their energy, and the lessons they had brought into his life. He understood that their visit was temporary, but the impact would last far longer than the day itself. The tallest sister turned to him one last time. "Marcus," she said softly, "remember that life will always bring unexpected moments. You cannot control them, but you can control how you respond. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act with awareness and respect, even when you are uncertain. Keep that in mind, and you will continue to grow." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into his heart. "I will," he replied. "I will remember." The other sisters smiled and gave him quiet nods before stepping back toward the forest. Marcus watched them move with the same calm confidence that had defined their arrival. As they disappeared among the trees, he felt a mixture of loneliness and connection, a reminder that life was filled with encounters that could change a person in ways that were subtle yet profound. Marcus returned to the farmhouse, his mind full of reflection. He realized that the night had taught him more about himself than any quiet day ever could. He understood that his life of routine and solitude had given him comfort, but it had also limited him. The sisters had shown him that true strength came from facing uncertainty, embracing challenges, and remaining aware of the world and people around him. He walked through his farm, noticing details he had overlooked for years: the way the sunlight touched the fields, the patterns of shadows on the fences, the subtle movements of his animals. Everything felt sharper, more alive, more connected. Marcus realized that the night had awakened him to the richness of life beyond his routines. For the first time in many years, Marcus felt a sense of gratitude for uncertainty. He understood that life could not always be controlled, and that growth often came from moments that challenged comfort and familiarity. The sisters had not imposed their will upon him. Instead, they had guided him gently through awareness, reflection, and quiet challenge. Marcus felt that he had passed a test, not of strength, but of mind and heart. The morning continued, and Marcus went about his chores with renewed energy and attention. He repaired fences with care, fed the animals with focus, and tended to the garden with mindfulness. Every task carried new meaning, and even the simplest actions felt like opportunities to practice awareness and patience. He realized that the lessons of the night were not confined to one moment. They could be applied to every day of his life, in every decision he made. Later, Marcus walked to the edge of the farm, looking out toward the forest where the sisters had disappeared. He felt a sense of connection, as if the land itself had absorbed their presence and carried their lessons forward. He knew that he would never forget this encounter, and that it would influence his life in subtle, profound ways for years to come. As the day progressed, neighbors who had heard rumors about the sisters' visit came by to ask questions. Marcus answered politely, keeping the details of the night private. He understood that the experience was personal and transformative, not something to be shared as gossip or exaggeration. He spoke honestly about the visit without revealing the depth of the lessons he had learned, knowing that the true meaning was something he would carry inside himself. By evening, Marcus sat outside by the fire, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was painted with deep oranges and purples once again, and the first stars began to appear. He thought about the sisters, about the night, and about the way life had shifted in a single, unexpected encounter. He felt a quiet sense of peace, mixed with anticipation for the future. He knew that challenges would continue to come, but he now had the awareness, patience, and courage to face them. Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned, the importance of observation, the power of awareness, the courage to face uncertainty, and the value of connection. The sisters had arrived unexpectedly, disrupting his quiet life, and yet they had left him stronger, wiser, and more alive. He realized that true growth often comes from moments that seem disruptive at first, but ultimately open the door to understanding and resilience. As night fell completely, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude. The world was vast and unpredictable, but he was no longer afraid of it. He understood that life would always bring challenges, unexpected encounters, and moments that test patience and courage. But he also knew that he had the inner strength to face them, and that awareness and respect could guide him through even the most uncertain times. Finally, Marcus stood and looked out at the stars. He felt a quiet connection to the universe, to the land around him, and to the lessons he had learned. The sisters had left, but their impact remained, gentle, powerful, and transformative. He smiled, feeling a sense of completion, and returned to his farmhouse with a calm heart, ready to continue his life with new understanding, new courage, and a renewed appreciation for the unexpected moments that make life meaningful. From that day on, Marcus's life on the farm was different. He still tended to his animals, still repaired fences, still worked the land with care, but he did so with awareness, patience, and the knowledge that life's true lessons often come from unexpected encounters. The memory of the three sisters remained with him, not as a story of fear or conflict, but as a reminder that growth comes through attention, courage, and the willingness to embrace the unknown.